Softball, football, tennis, a lot of stuff happening in the high school sports scene here in the Pikes Peak region. Luke, thank you so much for coming on. Luke Zahlmann, Carson Field, spring Soundoff for another week. And Luke, let's get right into it.
Yep.
Softball, they had their regionals last week, and two teams from the Pikes Peak region,
Mhm.
Mesa Ridge and Palmer Ridge, both made it to state. Just first off, let's talk a little bit about Mesa Ridge. They're a newcomer. They didn't make it last year to state, but they did this year. What boosted them up to getting to the culminating event?
So they have such an interesting combination because what happened in their regional was the host of it, Pueblo South, I believe they were a 2 seed, really high up there. Well, they lost game 1. And so immediately every other team in a regional bracket, when the top team loses, says, well, why not us? Why can't we? And so they have Cheyenne Walker and Lucia Quintana, and those are kind of the two that have led her. Cheyenne Walker, number 4 in Colorado with home runs. Lucia goes both ways. She hits, she's their dominant pitcher. So when you have people that can do things like that, Cheyenne, it's like anytime I've picked her multiple times this year for some of our players of the week because she's just been that good. She's come through with a power bat. And then you have Lucia who's able to shut teams out. She went 7 scoreless to beat Greeley West in the regional final. That's pretty impressive in a regional final over a higher seed to just go scoreless throughout the whole. So they have those two that they've just kind of came out of nowhere. They have a lot of really good seniors on that team. So it's hard to point at maybe one direct thing that it's like, okay, here's why Mesa Ridge took the step. But they really have, and they came out of nowhere. And as you were following me, you thought, okay, they won the first regional game. Well, in the second regional game, in the final, they're not playing the top seed in that regional, so who knows? And then they shut out Greeley West. Great regional tournament for them. And so obviously you get tabbed to go to state. And so it's been a great year for them, especially with someone like Cheyenne who's been with the program and she's a senior. It's really cool to see a team with so many seniors get to reach state because it's a big deal for softball in this area just to even reach state.
No, and Palmer Ridge, that was the one team that made it last year to state. And they'll see a common enemy, though, in their first game, Holy Family. What will it take to see a different result for the Bears?
So what's interesting is the Bears are going to be a different team this time around. They sent Gigi German to the circle last year. She was a dominant pitcher all year. Well, this year she got hurt. And so she's been trying to pitch through it. It's kind of in the back. So it's been tough for her to go through it. But now they have Ashlyn Short, who's also stepped up as a pitcher. They've both been dominant. But then on the Holy Family side, you're going to see Isabella Arroyo again. She was a freshman last year, already one of the best pitchers in the entire state. One of its better hitters, too. Well, now she's a sophomore. They're going to face her again. But talking to Coach Romero yesterday, where they feel good is this year in the PPAC, Lutheran joined their league, which Lutheran is the number 1 overall seed in the entire 4A tournament. So they faced Lutheran's pitcher twice this year. They've been able to see that speed, adjust to it. So he feels a little different going into it this year. He's like, we've seen it. We're prepared for it. We got to see it last year, which prepared us. So I think it's going to be really tough. Holy Family is a legitimately good softball program. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But I think they are a little better equipped to face Isabella Arroyo. And now you have 2 pitchers that you can bounce. When Gigi struggled a little bit early on last year, they kind of weren't able to go off of that as much. Now with Ashlyn really developing as a sophomore, they're able to kind of throw different maneuvers. And even in the regional, they were able to throw Gigi early. They were able to throw Ashlyn. They were able to mix it up in that tournament, which really helped them get through the regional too. So I think having 2 is pretty good because you never know when someone's going to have a bad day. And last year they kind of didn't have, no pun intended, but they didn't have that second pitch this year. And this year they really do. So
we talked last week about how hard it is to get even one team into state from this region. So getting 2 is very impressive.
Yep.
That said, we know how difficult the roads will be for both teams. Just how likely do you see that someone advances to the second round?
So Mesa Ridge got a good draw. They're going to play Elizabeth. And Mesa Ridge did lose to Elizabeth earlier this year, but it was just 4-0. And so that's going to be the 8-9 seed matchup, which if you had to pick, I'm sure they're feeling a lot better about their draw than, say, a Palmer Ridge is about drawing number 2 Holy Family. So I could see Mesa Ridge winning that first game. Palmer Ridge, they have a lot of experience. They've faced Lutheran. So I think Coach Romero, he really focused on the We need to do all the little things that can win you a state game. We need to hit in critical situations. We need to field well, which is something you don't really think about. But as few runs as can be scored in a state game, if you bob a one ball, someone gets an extra base. I mean, those type of things can really come back to hurt you. So I think Mesa Ridge, if I had to pick from the two, probably has a better chance, almost solely based on their draw,
Matchup,
because
yeah.
I think the two teams are pretty even, Palmer Ridge and Mesa Ridge. But I think there is a little bit of a revenge factor. So at 12:15 on Friday, I think Palmer Ridge might be looking to get a little bit of that revenge this year.
It'll be interesting to see. But now let's talk a little bit about the Friday night lights, or in some cases here, the Thursday night lights, or the Saturday afternoon daylight. But a lot of big games this week. One of those, Mesa Ridge playing a team from a long way away, which is Montrose. And the Grizzlies have been hot lately. They're trying to get to 7-2. What do they need to do to get there?
So Mesa Ridge, it's going to be a tough team they're facing, because this is a Montrose team that was highly ranked from the very beginning. They got knocked down a little from 2 straight losses to begin the year to Palmer Ridge, a local, and Fruita Monument, which when you look at those 2 losses, now that Palmer Ridge is a top 4A, you think, well, those really aren't that bad of losses for Montrose. Well, since then, they've won 7 straight. They haven't lost since those 2. So they're coming in hot. But I think one thing that is always important in these games is which team had to travel, because Montrose is from 4+ hours away. They're coming to Mesa Ridge. So I think that could play a big role in that game. It's a Thursday game, already kind of a shorter week, And so I think the biggest challenge, it's going to be the biggest challenge for sophomore Bryce Reel since that Palmer Ridge game for Mesa Ridge. I mean, he's faced some good teams along the way, but this is going to be his biggest test, and he's developed really well. I mean, you have a receiver like Carver Cheeks, who set the new all-time or career receiving touchdowns record for the Grizzlies last week. So he's been rolling. They have the weapons to do it. It's just about executing. So I'll be curious to see how they go about that.
One game I'm really intrigued about, I think Hugh Johnson's going to be there for us covering it, is going to be Air Academy versus Falcon. And those teams on paper, I think that should be a really intriguing matchup.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's strength on strength in many ways, because Falcon's biggest strength on their entire team, in my opinion, is that defensive line. That's where they have their best overall player, and it's just where they have the most depth and quality of players, going against Sam Beers of Air Academy, which on a normal week you would think, okay, Sam Beers, he's going to be hard to defend. Well, he got hurt last week, and so he tried to play through it. He tried to play through the injury. So coming into this week, we'll have to kind of see how that injury affects him, because against a good D-line, you're taking some hits, and Air Academy is looking to rebound from a pretty lopsided loss a couple of weeks ago to Vista Ridge. So, I think Air Academy can handle that challenge, but I think it is kind of that strength on strength, that you usually see. And, Falcons coming off back-to-back losses, but it's to Montrose and Pueblo West, 2 pretty good teams. So both teams will come in with plenty of motivation. I think the biggest matchup will be Sam Beers' health almost versus that Falcon D-line.
Okay, interesting. And I know before we came on, we were talking about how good that Vista Ridge offense and Braden Dorman has been. I mean, Rampart's a team, they've had some good wins recently, but what do they need to do to slow them down? Because I feel like that's not an easy task at all.
So what a stretch for Rampart to have to face. They had to face a pretty tough stretch earlier this year with some losses. Well, now you get Palmer Ridge one week, the number 1 team in 4A, and now you have to face, well, they might not be the number 1 team in 4A, a Vista Ridge team that, for my money, has the best weapons of any team in the area as far as offense goes. So it's going to be tough. Dorman puts up over 500 yards and 8 touchdowns last week against Cheyenne Mountain, which, I've said it multiple. We've just never seen someone put up numbers like this in the area. He's top 10 in the entire nation in passing yards. So it's going to be a very difficult challenge. Rampart's secondary, the last time I saw him against Cheyenne Mountain, played really well. So it's hard to, kind of do the math on, okay, well, Cheyenne Mountain versus Vista Ridge. So it's the number 1 key to ever beating Braden Dorman is to get consistent pressure so that Brandon Hills and Keyshawn Dooley can't get the ball as much, and to completely wipe out the running game. So all of that comes from that defensive front 7. So if Ramparts can come out motivated, They should feel pretty good, but it's a very steep mismatch in many ways for any team to have to face those three.
No, for sure, for sure. And we were both at the heartbreaker that Banning Lewis suffered last week. I mean, against CSCS, they had that game, couldn't quite hold on to it, but this week they play against Rye. Do you see them bouncing back?
So a lot of penalties for Banning Lewis. A lot of penalties kind of extended that game. And CSCS, to their credit, bounced back. They had a great fourth quarter, came all the way back. But I thought you started to see a little fatigue for Banning Lewis, which is very common in a program that has guys that are playing on all three units. I mean, their punter, just for example, Ben Early. He's punting, then he's playing defense, then he's playing offense.
Yeah.
He really never leaves the field. And so you can see the fatigue to start to set in. So I'll be curious to see how they're able to bounce back from that fatigue. And also the offense just needs to be a little more consistent this week. They had a lot of kind of bobbled snaps. They had a lot of just miscues on offense that I don't think are very common for them. And so they'll need to clean those up too. And I think they can beat Rye if those things shape up, but Rye's a very good football team. So it's another stiff test for the Stallions.
Something about fall is that it seems like another sport ends its season every week or something close to it. And one of those is tennis, which wrapped up Tuesday. And Cheyenne Mountain fell to Kent Denver 7-0 in the first ever state championship duels, team style. Just overall, with that being a new format, what did you think about it?
I credit CHSAA for a lot of things they do. And the onus behind this, what they told the public, the coaches, everyone, is we wanted to resemble more the NCAA tournament. And this is how the NCAA works.
Yes, it is.
It's very team-based, team versus team. But I think what they may quickly figure out is it's just not easily replicated in Colorado high school tennis, because what I noticed, what coaches noticed that I talked to, is the energy was really gone from the individual tournament. The guys are trying to hype each other up. They're screaming across courts to each other. They're trying to still have that sense of team there. But when you're not tracking the points on a notepad and okay, this last doubles match we have, this is the match, and everyone crowds around the fence at Pueblo City Park. It's really something to behold. And it was completely non-existent this year.
Interesting.
And I think the state tennis tournament lost a little bit without that. And so I think that was always so fun. So I wouldn't think they'll adjust the format back after 1 year of it, but maybe they find ways to, maybe recreate that a little bit or adjust it a little bit so you can get that energy back, because it was very lifeless, I noticed at Saturday's finals. And I think that's a bummer, because tennis was one of the sports that always had so much buzz and electricity at that final Saturday in Pueblo.
That's interesting. I had never really thought about how the individual tournaments might lose some of their luster, some of their energy, but that really is, I could see that with the team tournament. Obviously, those singles, doubles matches don't really count to that anymore. So that's an interesting dynamic I had never really thought about.
Well, and with this new format, I'm curious to see, because you went up to Denver to see how the team tournament went. I assume all 7 matchups were going at the same time. How did you see that impact energy there, as far as, teammates being able to root on their own teammates, that type of deal?
Well, it was weird because half of the one court was dedicated to the 4A match, one was dedicated to 5. So not all of them were going at the same time. So the 3 single matches started, and then once those were over, the doubles would come on the court, and then those would kind of overlap with the singles, obviously. But I mean, the energy was decent for the team tournament. A lot of students from Cheyenne Mountain and Kent Denver there supporting their teams. But I don't know, it was very interesting. I kind of like the playoff format, but I kind of totally see what you mean about the energy being gone. I think it helps in one way, hurts in another one. So that is interesting. And though I touched on the 7-0 win a minute ago for Kent Denver, I mean, they obviously won that match. They won their first 4 points very easily, but the next 3 they won were very contested. I mean, 2 went to 3 sets, and it looked like they were going to be in those matchups. Steven Zhu lost a heartbreaker in his number 2 singles match. But I mean, what can you say about his career? Cheyenne Mountain, all of their seniors just had illustrious careers there. So disappointing ending for them, but I talked to so many of those guys, and they were holding their heads up high, knowing how much they have achieved in that time.
When it makes you wonder too how the competitiveness of the tournaments, because if you had been going by points, which though they were no longer being counted officially, every coach I talked to said that they were still keeping track of points because when you're able to see, okay, here's as a Cheyenne Mountain, for example, when you're playing the team tournament against Ken Denver, you were able to see, okay, here's how each of theirs did. Here's how each of ours did.
Yeah.
Here's how they did against each other. Here's how. So I kind of like that aspect of it in that you're almost getting to scout a little bit. But what I had heard from all the people counting points and then what you kind of bared witness to is it was just one of those years where one team, they had it. Ken Denver had it this year. By points, they would have, they lapped the field in points this year. And then you saw in the, team tournament, 7-0 is pretty resounding, especially when you compare it to 5A, which was kind of on the ropes for a little while between Cherry Creek and Valor Christian. So you wonder if maybe the energy got sapped just a little bit by how dominant Ken Denver was. Yeah. So maybe we see next year or the following year or even the year after that, maybe as this format gets adjusted to, maybe the energy levels rise up a little bit. You never know.
No, sure.
But first impressions were that it was rough. But, a lot of factors went into that.
No, that's true. That's true. And if we look way ahead to next fall already, Cheyenne Mountain's kind of been the force in this area as of late, but Coronado had a very impressive season too. Do you think they're going to catch up some steam next year?
So they're two juxtaposing teams really in that the Hawks, as you kind of mentioned, graduated almost everybody.
Yeah.
Almost everybody is gone. They're going to have to really recuperate in that sense. Well, for Coronado, it's the exact opposite. They had one member of one of their doubles tandems graduate, and every other person is coming back. You're talking one singles, two singles, third. When you have that much continuity, they were able to experience it this year. Miles Hoover is their number one singles. He lost round one. Yeah. He was able to experience, okay, here's what this is like, and the guy he lost to is graduating, Gavin Hunter from Sand Creek. He's gone. Nathan Gold will be back, so that number one singles bracket isn't getting any easier. But I think when you get the experience, it's like this was arguably the best year in Coronado tennis history. So how do you then build on it?
Yeah,
it's one thing to translate that success year to year, but it's another to build on it, to have an improved number one singles, number two singles, number three, to improve upon everything. So I think you could very well see Coronado overtake Cheyenne Mountain, even if it's only temporarily. Cheyenne Mountain will reload, and they're going to reload quickly because that's just what they do under Coach Dave Adams. But I think for a year, you could really see Coronado overtake them, given what we saw this year, qualifying all 7 teams. So, their hope, I would think, would be to qualify all 7 again next year and hope that experience of being in Pueblo this year pays off.
It's possible, but I also talked to some of those seniors who are leaving Cheyenne Mountain. They have the right man steering the ship there, Dave Adams. He's a legend in the Colorado tennis community.
Yep.
They think that really whatever team you give him, they're going to be competitive. So I think it'll be interesting, like you said, to see how they regroup. But you also touched on Nathan Gold, and he's unbeatable at this point in the Colorado landscape. He's one of the best players in the nation, not only in Colorado. Do you ever, in his high school career, see him losing?
So I'm from the area. There's it's going to be a pretty good group that'll oppose him next year. I brought it up. Miles Hoover is going to go back as a senior, having been through state tournaments with Cheyenne Mountain and now Coronado. And then you have Andrew Ballinger, who you had brought up, was able to take 2 off of gold in the team final yesterday. It's not a monumentous step, but it is.
Do you know how many kids get double bageled by Andrew
exactly
Gold?
Even in the individual final, even in the individual final, his match was over in 35 minutes. I swear. It was over before a lot of matches were going into the second set. So he does that to a lot of people, but you have those two. And then you have Discovery Canyon's Sean Brakowski. He lost early on due to medical retirement for a groin injury. Well, he takes a night to rest up. He gets recuperated, and then he comes all the way through the playback and ended up getting third.
Yeah.
So it's not nothing to get that experience of taking a hit to the mouth early on and then being able to rebound from that. I think that'll help him too. So we'll send a lot of good singles players from the area, but it is a huge challenge, and you better believe that if someone does upset number one singles,
There's going to be a party there.
There's going to be a party for whatever team does it, whether it's local or non-local. So
no, I'm glad you mentioned Andrew though, because I mean, two games in the scheme of things isn't huge, but so many people to get 6-0, 6-0'd by him to even take 2 games, I was very impressed by that effort.
So. Yeah, and he got to see it. He got to see it multiple times this year. He got to see it both through the team tournament, obviously seeing Ken Denver and some other really good number one singles.
Yeah.
Saw it against Ken Denver during the year, played Miles Hoover during. So he was able to have all these really good experiences as a sophomore. And it was his first year playing singles because as a freshman, he was in doubles.
Yep.
So it'll be cool to see kind of his development. You'll be kind of able to see it in real time.
Well, we have a lot of months to see his development, the development of other players. So I guess we'll wrap it up here, Luke. As always, thank you so much for being here.
You bet.
Guys, it's been fun. Pikes Peak, stay safe.